If you're like me, usually what happens when you start dating somebody is you're like super in love, never felt this way before, can't keep your hands off this person. Like a few months pass and you start getting really comfortable together. Slowly over time, you're just like, I don't really want to have sex with this person as much. And you kind of wonder to yourself, like, why don't I feel the way I did at the beginning? Maybe you're like, oh, is it because of me? Or is it the person, just that I don't like them that much? That's what we're gonna talk about in this video. Specifically, a lot of this insight is coming from a book called Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. In this book, she talks about why desire fades over time in a long-term relationship and whether or not there's other ways to go about it so that it doesn't happen this way. But first off, hey, my name's Joyce. Welcome to the channel. I am actually a New York transplant and I used to live out of my Honda Civic before I got into a crash that totaled the car. Now I'm living in New York full-time, just trying to get my shit together. This channel is my way to share about a lot of the things that I'm learning about life, love, and happiness, being honest and transparent about those things. So if that vibes with you or it sounds interesting, make sure to hit that subscribe button to get notified when I release videos. To start off with, if you're watching this video, you probably fall into one of two camps. In the book, Perel talks about two groups of people, the realists and the romantics. And they both lie at opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to desire fading in relationships over time. The realist would look at how desire fades over time and say, well, that's pretty normal. That's bound to happen. Love changes over time. You just have to deal with it. And love is about commitment and hard work. On the other hand, the romantics may say something more like, yeah, I just can't stay in a relationship that I don't feel as intensely for that person. And that's why I don't stay in long-term relationships. Like, hey, if I'm not feeling passionate about this person, I must not really be that into them anymore. These are kind of the main camps that people fall into when it comes to desire fading over time in a relationship. Whether or not you're a realist or a romantic, both groups of people agree that desire fades over time. The way she says it is that romantics value intensity over stability. Realists value security over passion, but both are often disappointed, for few people can live happily at either extreme. Whether you're at one end and you've been taught relationships are hard work and desire is gonna fade over time, you might be settling for a relationship that isn't what it could be. And on the other hand, if you're romantic, maybe you are choosing to leave relationships when the passion does fade. You may be missing out on opportunities for stability in which you can explore passion with one person. I started out as more of a romantic before going to the realist side of things. I was in a lot of really up and down relationships that were very intense, where I sought the honeymoon phase, and as soon as the honeymoon phase started fading, I felt like, oh man, I must be falling out of love with this person. Now I'm very much more a realist. You know, I grew up with Asian parents. My mom usually says to me that relationships are all about commitment, they're about compromise. So I grew up with this sort of philosophy where you just kind of make it work no matter how you feel. So really I fall on both sides of the spectrum at different times in my life. Now I see how believing those things has actually hindered the satisfaction I've had in my relationships. So the first step in all of this is reflect on what you believe about relationships. Perel talks about how it's popular amongst therapists to believe that sex is an indication of how healthy the relationship is. But we all know that it's not cause and effect, because if you've ever had the experience of sleeping with somebody and not having any romantic feelings for them, maybe on the other hand, you've been in a long-term relationship where you just felt really safe and secure, but you don't want to have sex with them. As Perel says, the intimate story of a couple can indeed tell us a lot about their erotic life, but it can't tell us everything. There's a complex relationship between love and desire, and it is not a cause and effect, linear arrangement. Maybe intimacy only sometimes begets sexuality. I like to picture it as an iceberg, right? The sex life is the tip of the iceberg, which you can look at and say, oh, they are having good sex, therefore it must mean they have a solid foundation, a healthy foundation, or no, they're having bad sex, which means they're having an unhealthy relationship. But we know it's not one-to-one like that. We know it's not cause and effect like that. And in fact, intimacy is only one small part of what may be contributing to good sex. Actually, intimacy may sometimes be a blocker for desire in a long-term relationship. When I first read this, I was overcome with relief because I realized, oh, just because you and your partner are not having sex, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with the relationship. Perel argues that these are actually parallel things that don't necessarily affect each other, but can affect each other. Intimacy can clearly affect sex and desire for a lot of people, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Like, there's plenty of couples that have great communication, a lot of respect and love for each other, but just realize that it doesn't translate to passion or fire in the bedroom. If that's the case, why does desire fade over time? Perel argues that it's because when two people first meet each other and get to know each other, what tends to happen is when they are in the honeymoon stage and they're super high on each other's love, chemicals are just like flowing in their veins, they want to know everything about each other, they want to be together all the time, and they get to a point where they're merging as people. And I know this is definitely true for myself. I know not everybody operates this way, but basically she's saying when two people merge, you get to a point where, because there isn't a separate person, a separate being to desire and to love, then it actually snuffs out a lot of that desire. When intimacy collapses into fusion, it is not a lack of closeness, but too much closeness that impedes desire. So she talks about how the two pillars of love are surrender and autonomy. And basically, you need both to keep a relationship alive and kicking. If you have too much separateness, then you can't really connect with each other. And if you have too much merging, then you don't have an other or a separate individual to interact with. There is no other person to desire, right? Just as much as we need closeness in relationships, we also need separateness. There are 3 ways Perel suggests that you can maintain separateness, which will enhance the desire in a relationship. So the first one is to embrace the mystery over the story. A lot of times when you stay in a relationship with someone for a while, you start telling yourself a story about who they are to you. When you ask yourself, what purpose is this story serving in my life? That's when you realize that sometimes the story is maintaining a status quo for you. It is serving the relationship somehow. And if something threatens that story, it can be really destabilizing for a relationship. For me, thinking about my relationship with my partner and telling myself, oh, he's a stable person, and then asking myself, okay, but what if he wasn't actually as stable as I thought he was? That gives me some anxiety, gives me panic, and that shows me that I'm telling that story for a reason. That story is helping me to feel safe in this relationship. But what Perel says is that we should be open to who our partner is beyond the story. Even if you've known this person for 20 years and you think they react in a specific way to a specific situation every single time, it doesn't mean that they're going to react that way the next time. Embracing the fact that they can be their own person and step outside of the story you're telling means that you're creating mystery in your relationship. You're acknowledging that even if you think you know somebody 100%, it's really an illusion. It's an illusion of stability. When you embrace the fact that you really don't know this person as well as you might think you do, it creates that separateness and reminds you this person probably isn't as predictable as you think they are. Secondly, something you can do is developing autonomy, even if it hurts. I say this because I remember a time when I was back-to-back in relationships and I just felt really attached to these people as part of my identity. And I finally got to this point where I told myself I wasn't gonna date for a whole year and I was going to commit to it. And I remember that year being one of the hardest years of my life. I felt super lonely and confused because I didn't really know who I was outside of these relationships. What I found was myself through all of that. Those nights just staying home alone, reading a book or journaling and pushing through a lot of that loneliness. I found a lot of who I am, what I like. It's helped me develop confidence in every single relationship after that. A lot of times I used to worry when I broke up with somebody, was I going to suddenly lose my desire for all these things that I had picked up during that time. Like, oh, this guy that I like, he's going to church, and I start going to church. If suddenly he ended things, would I still be going to church? A lot of it is figuring out what is truly you and what is you because the person you like is also doing it. Third, something you can do is nurturing your secret garden. A lot of couples, and myself included, sometimes I feel offended when my partner doesn't want to share certain things with me. They need their alone time, because sometimes I can take that as rejection. But this idea of cultivating your own secret garden where you have your own space, your own thoughts. And the thing about a secret garden is that it's secret. It's based on this idea that you don't need to share everything with your partner, and it's probably better to not share certain things. So this is definitely something I've been thinking a lot about, why I feel the need to know everything about my partner when I can allow him and I to have our own secret gardens where we don't have to share everything. That also creates a sense of separateness that, at the end of the day, fans the flame. As couples settle into the comforts of love, they cease to fan the flame of desire. They forget that fire needs air. So I hope that's a reminder for all of us that sometimes what we need in a relationship is separateness and not more merging. And that means embracing the mystery over the story. It means developing autonomy even if it hurts. And also lastly, nurturing the secret spaces and the secret gardens inside of us and knowing that we don't have to share everything all the time. Perel's book actually goes way more into depth on all of these topics, so I highly recommend that you pick up the book yourself and support her work. I'm learning a lot from it. It's changing the way that I've thought about relationships for a really long time. Let me know in the comments if any of this resonates with you. I don't